This is you've been seeing me a lot today, but I promise I'll get off real quick this time. Our next panel is going to be moderated by Achille Ettorre, who is Research and Advisory at the International Institute for Analytics. And of course, keynote that you just heard, Namir Anani, is going to be one of the speakers as well on the panel. Mike Branch, who is also the VP of Analytics at Geotab, Shelby Austin, head of Omnia AI at Deloitte, and finally Joseph Kurian, who is the senior advisor at Ontario, which is awesome. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome them to the panel. Hello. How's it going? So before we get into this, a little birdie told me that Achille might have a significant surprise. So I'd want everybody to sort of keep their eyes peeled, because it's going to be a special surprise that I don't think anybody, including the organizers here, have any idea about.
Nervous about this surprise? We're very nervous.
Yeah.
No, don't be nervous.
No idea what you're going to say.
Don't be nervous. Let me just get acquainted here. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having us. I hear this morning's been fun-filled. A lot of great speakers, a lot of good discussion. Our panelists are pretty excited to share their experiences today. But I want to push this a little further. So I want to do one of two things. I think I do want involvement from the audience. So we have two microphones. Where are they? I can't see. There's somewhere. There's microphones somewhere. So they're going to come along the sides here. If you have a question or you have something that you want to add to the discussion, I want you to put your hand up. And somehow I'm going to look out for you, or someone will engage me so that I can put you into this conversation. So, sorry. So what we're talking about today is AI and tech superpowers beyond 5G. And we want to get a thought in terms of what we think that means for us, but we also want to understand where we sit in the international playing ground. This is where I'll tell you that my surprise plays out. One of the things that I find pretty aspiring, and I won't speak to this side of the world. I'll talk to what China's doing. A gentleman by the name of Kung Fu Lee. He's the chairman of Sino-US Ventures that manages a $2 million dual currency fund, and it focuses on the development of the next generation of Chinese high-tech companies. That's very profound because this gentleman here ran Google China. He runs a think tank in China that runs Baidu, Huawei, and has worked with all industry leaders across the world. So I'll be looking to the panel to share their experiences on this and what they think. And let me preface this by this. I want to introduce the panel. I know we did a brief introduction on everyone. I'm going to ask the panel to share one fun fact about themselves before we move on. So we'll start off with Joe, and we'll move this way.
Thank you, Achille. So when I was a couple of years back, I had the opportunity to hike through the Alps, particularly Jungfrau area in Switzerland. So I hiked through some of the beautiful glaciers in Europe. So that was a good, memorable thing I did. Thank you.
Oh, my fun fact. I suppose my fun fact is I like to spend some time on the weekends baking pies, fruit pies. And that's what I like to do with my hobby.
So Achille just sprung this on us right before, so we didn't have a lot of time to really think about this. So I am absolutely not a dancer by any means, but somehow I was sprung up on stage to tap dance in a musical a few years back.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, the first surprise of today is that, Mike, if you can show us, give us an example.
Absolutely not. Like I said, not a dancer.
All right. And Namir, that was a great talk you just had. Looking forward to going a little deeper. If you can share one fun fact of yourself.
I'm caught right in the middle here. I play water polo. I have a fun cat called Lucy. There you go. So that's
Hey, I got a dog named Lucy.
Oh, there you go. So
All right.
yeah, uniformity.
Yes. Where are the mics? Okay, I need two people to tell me what they want out of this panel session. I think we got about an hour, but I need two people to volunteer and tell me. I see Faisal already. I'd like to hear what Faisal from BMO.
What about fun fact about Achille?
That's a great one. That is a great one.
Touche. Good for you.
Very funny, Faisal, very funny. Okay, fun fact about Achille. Achille likes to do a lot of different things. I do like adventures. One of the fun facts about me is I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro once I finished my once I finished my MBA at Western. That off? Thanks, Faisal. Fazal, what are you guys looking for out of the panel? What do you want to hear from us? I really want to leverage this group's experience because there's a plethora of experience, and I don't just want to get into definitions and regular conversation. Nobody wants to know anything about this? Right here at the front.
Can I just shout it out?
Go ahead.
It says beyond 5G.
Yeah.
But can you guys start at 5G?
Okay. Okay. That's going to take the whole hour. But okay. We'll start there. Anyone else? Gentleman at the front.
Thank you. So I guess what I'm curious about, and this is a trending topic in Canadian politics, is so the inclusion of technology players like Huawei in 5G and moving forward. Considering the importance of privacy, that was a theme in the first half of the session. Can you speak to potentially untrustworthy actors being included in a system that will be used around the world?
I'm glad I'm just facilitating today. All right. Okay. Anyone else? Anyone else? I asked for two, but anyone else? Okay. All right. I'm going to introduce one surprise. So I knew that this topic could be heavy. I knew that starting off at 5G is not an easy thing to do, and leveraging and augmenting the experiences that I've seen from the panel, Achille decided to call a friend, and it's kind of how I do things to get the best message across. So I'll do my best to preface this, and we're gonna dial him up. We'll cue him in. JP, if you can cue him in any time. I've asked Mr. Davenport, Dr. Davenport, to join us. He's a distinguished professor at Information Technology and Management at Babson College. He's a co-founder of the International Institute for Analytics, fellow MIT Initiative for the Digital Economy, and a senior advisor to Deloitte Analytics.
Hi, Tom. I owe you an email. How are you?
Tom, can you hear us? So Tom's driving.
Hi, Shelby. I'd rather have a pie than an email if that was you.
I will absolutely send you a pie.
I can hear you.
Tom, we can't hear you. We're losing you.
Need 5G.
We need 5G. So Shelby, Tom has asked me to ask for this write-up, this publication that I'm excited about to see when it gets out, and it actually is made public to everyone. So, having said that, that's my first surprise, and what I'm going to say is this. This is an informal, I'll say, chat. I want the audience to chime in as a preface to what the panelists are going to say, and we can go as deep as we want. We're going to start off with 5G based on what we've said, but I have some questions that I have to kind of get to, sir. But I'll come back in the end to make sure we circled. So, Tom, can you hear us? All right, I'm going to ask a question.
Yep.
Thanks for joining, Tom. I appreciate it. I owe you. I'll make it up to you when I see you in the next few weeks. So first question. With the recent media coverage on Sino-US competition in 5G, how do you see this impacting AI or technology development of Canada? And I'd like one of the panelists to take this on first. Who would like to start us off? Looks like Shelby.
Oh, goodness. Okay, so as the only non-5G expert on the panel, I will certainly kick us off. So my focus is AI, unrelated to 5G. But here's what I think 5G will do for us. I think much like AI, which will be further enhanced by 5G, I think what we'll see is an increase of jobs. The most recent stats is 5G will add $40 billion to the global economy. It will add 250,000 jobs. So I think what I see as the future is yet another opportunity where if Canada can get itself a little bit more on the front foot and a little bit less on the back foot, which we were with mobile and a few other technologies historically, I think that there is a great opportunity for us to find growth in this area.
Michael.
I mean, I think the competition between the United States and China right now, there's two different ways of looking at it, and within China, I mean, you can obviously leverage AI to do whatever you want, right? The data is free flowing. There's a lot of opportunity that exists there to really supercharge AI efforts, whereas within the North American and European context, it's a little bit different, especially within the U.S. So what I hope that we as Canada can do is kind of learn to come somewhere in between, right? So the U.S. is getting a little bit more guarded with the respect to use of the data from a privacy perspective. You look at bills like CCPA in California, you look at the GDPR in EU. I think we need to find some space in between. And China's just blowing up. They're putting like $16 billion funds together to enable AI within a single city. Meanwhile, you know, we've scrapped 20 million from Vector. And I mean, so I think we need to play it smart, but it comes somewhere kind of in between.
All right, we have Namir. Namir, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think the intersection between 5G and AI is going to be very, very critical for the next number of years for several reasons. One is when I talked about 5G has the capacity in terms of the sub-milliseconds, very fast connectivity, almost real time, plus the bandwidth capability. It's going to allow AI to go from this weak and narrow concept of basically performing one task, chess or checkers or something, or Siri, to doing multiple tasks and take it to a whole autonomous capability. So when you think about it, in the absence of 5G, true autonomy is going to be difficult to achieve in the next number of years. So that's why we need fifth generation mobile to allow that and allow other capacities. So the super intelligence, or not the super intelligence, the strong intelligence have to be coupled with fifth generation mobile if we want to win that race.
Okay.
I'd like to, Achille, I would like to just add to that.
Okay.
I think Canada, or our ecosystem, is well positioned from the experience I've had earlier in this industry and current roles. Like 5G is sort of you can look at it as like a magic carpet for the rest of the industries. You can have AI, IoT, several types of technologies operating on top of it, and this is going to transform several sectors. The projections are that by 2020 there's going to be 20 billion connected devices across, and all of them are going to be piling up truckloads of data in a record time. So 5G is going to be massively enabling different kinds of technologies to play on that infrastructure, including virtual reality. So you can look at it as a transition from maybe the typewriter to the computer, or maybe the steam engine to the high-speed rail, as far as industries and the economy is concerned. In terms of Canada, I think without just looking at where people are putting the money, there's a lot of talent, just like Geoffrey Hinton's case, where in the winter of AI, in the research labs, that team was toiling in the depths of deep learning to bring out something. So in Canada, there's been a dedicated critical mass of researchers across. And one of the things I find which singles us out is the maturity that I call the triple helix model has brought to the table. That is a partnership between industry, government, and the research and academia. To illustrate, I think I can give you a few examples in terms of illustrating our preparedness. One is the Ettorre, which is an Ontario, Quebec, Canada initiative for a test bed for 5G. More than $400 million have gone into that initiative, and companies are able to test apps, applications, and solutions on platforms. The other one is CENGEN, which is a Center of Excellence for Next Generation Networks. So that's, again, the first one, and core companies like Ericsson are involved in that. And Ericsson, as you may be aware, has more than 45 global partnerships with 5G-related device makers, network makers, and software, etc. The other one I was coming to is the Center of Excellence for Next Generation Networks, where companies like Nokia and Bell are involved. And these are enabling companies to prototype, pilot, scale, and commercialize applications on infrastructure. So examples being, there's a company, an AI company, which is using that infrastructure to scale smart grids, optimizing smart grids. So they're simulating a 1 million person community and how to optimize power supply to that community. There's another company, Agro UK, which is sort of developing models on this infrastructure for predicting pesticides use in the farming area. So just to illustrate, different industries have been considered in these applications. And there is the Autonomous Vehicle Innovation Network, AVIN, which Ontario's put in more than $80 million in. And there's different players involved. And again, the application of 5G to the autonomous vehicle area is critical. So those are some of the examples I just wanted to highlight.
I had a quick question for you there based on something you said. So are you seeing any gaps? You mentioned that there's a lot of research that's being done. We've had an advancement now in collaborations with industry and research institutes. Are you seeing any gaps into getting to commercialization?
Well, 5G is being rolled out. It's cutting edge.
Sorry, within AI.
Yeah, so for whatever it's worth, if you don't mind,
Sure,
we
jump in,
just
yeah.
we
No
just
fighting up here.
we did some
No fighting up here.
we did some research on this in terms of like what's stunting the growth of AI, because there are like a number of things in this area that are happening. First of all, anyone want to take a guess about how many Canadians think they use AI in their daily lives? Anyone want to shout out a number? 10%. So that would also be shocking, but it's actually only 4% of Canadians think that they use AI in their daily lives. And how I know, and how many folks have a smartphone in their pocket? Like everyone. And in addition, our research revealed other things like people are genuinely concerned that current AI, meaning narrow AI, this is a pretty sophisticated audience, they're quite concerned about their humanity in terms of like even day-to-day AI. And so one of the things that's quite challenging for Canadians in particular is we have the most amazing Jeff Hinton, Sutton, Bengio. We've got some great godfathers of deep learning here, and that's wonderful. We've got Vector, Amy, Mila, blah, blah, like so much amazing stuff. The government's taken some great steps here too, but it's really focused on harnessing talent and growing up talent rather than focused on demand. And I think that if we don't, we really are actually hurting ourselves quite badly right now. We need to generate that demand for AI, and if that's what we need to really work on, and part of it is an education gap. Canadians can't sort of demand AI through their consumer experiences if they don't understand kind of what AI is and what the potential there. And just one final thought from the research is that AI was found to be such a disruptive technology that it was both a general purpose technology and a new method of inventing, which roughly translates into probably it has the potential to be the most important technology really of our experience and our time, more important than things like the internet, which would not have been found to sort of score that high on both quadrants. So really like the potential is so great, and we are in the exact loop that you described.
Maybe I would add, I think that the commercialization is certainly an important aspect, specifically that we're a small economy compared to the rest of the world. And if we're going to attract the companies of the future and the buyers of the future, we really have to develop that in the next number of years. So.
Hold on, guys. Hold on. We have a question from the audience. I want to encourage this engagement. No. First, the fun facts, sir.
Okay, I volunteer for the Repair Cafe.
Okay.
So we travel around Toronto and once a month or more offer to fix anything people, to repair anything. Is this thing on? Oh, there we go.
Oh, yeah, we can hear you.
We offer a repair service basically for anything that people can carry or wheel into a library or community center all around the city. And so we've taken about 5,000 items out of the landfill stream over the past 4 or 5 years.
That's good. That's good. Awesome.
So, and now, of course, I've completely forgotten the question I was going to ask.
That's okay. We're going to have some dancing before. We're going to have some dancing on stage. So,
follow up to
Shelby.
I know it's Shelby, but what were you just saying?
I was just saying that there's a sort of demand supply gap in terms of what we're coming to in AI.
Okay, so my question was it was actually more around the stat that you related about the 4% of people believe they're using AI when 99+% are, but that 96% of people that don't believe that they're using AI are also voting in politicians that then cut funding to the Vector Institute and et cetera, et cetera. This seems like a big factor holding us back from the kind of progress that you alluded to.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think that there's so much funding being poured across the map globally, and then when we start cutting funding to really important institutions like the Vector Institute, that's absolutely ridiculous. We should be pouring more funding back into this because it takes the private sector, which is pouring funding into it, right? But it also takes the public sector as well, and to encourage the growth of new jobs in this sector. We have a ton of experience from a data science perspective. We've seen machine learning well adopted, the democratization of it, but there are still gaps in that whole pipeline. I see huge gaps in data engineering that just we can't fill enough of them. So I think there's a lot that still needs to be done.
If I can quickly just add as well is that there's obviously the role of government and funding and others, but I think also if we really want to unleash the development of AI in Canada, we have to also bring the venture capitalist market as well into that, to play into that space, because that's again what's helping other countries expand in that space.
All right, we're going to get to your question one sec. Tom, are you on?
Over here.
I am.
And what you're hearing, what's your take, what would you add from our friends, I'll say, in America or across the globe? What are you seeing with respect to funding and how it relates to your good friends up here in Canada?
Well, yes, I'll represent everyone in the globe outside of Canada, so that's my role today. Now, I think I'm not quite as optimistic that 5G will transform our lives as we know them, but it seems to me if it has the effect of making mobile devices, mobile applications much more pervasive, that will create massive amounts of data, and data is the fuel of AI. So to echo one thing that was said earlier, I think Canada needs to figure out an enlightened position on issues of data privacy and data usage, but at the same time, maybe this is related to Shelby's point, provoke enough demand through 5G and other new technologies that there is massive amounts of data available to train models that will advance AI as well. And I think it's a very tricky balance, and I'm not sure that any country in the world has yet figured out the right position on it.
Okay. Hey, Tom, we didn't get this from you. Are you okay if I share a fun fact, or do you want to share one? Or I have a few I can pick from.
Well, I told Achille that even though I'm not Canadian, I am writing a novel now about an MIT PhD student from Hamilton, Ontario, graduate of Waterloo, who advances the art of robotic football. It's more American football than Canadian football, but they're pretty similar. So.
Okay. That's not the one I was thinking of, but that's okay. That's the next talk. We'll do the next talk. We had a question, I think it was right here. Sir?
Over here.
Oh, sorry.
Over here.
Right.
And one behind it, too.
Oh, okay.
Marco.
Give me 1 sec, Marco. We'll do this gentleman first, and we'll go to you.
So the thing that, Shelby, you began this by just saying we kind of missed the early stuff on telecoms. A lot of folks have talked about whether or not the Vector Institute is being adequately funded. Most of the people who write about this have argued that Canada does an enormously good job of funding research. Hinton was actually funded by CFAR, which is a slightly different play, but that in fact, it's not a problem of our universities or our public funding, but Canadian businesses are astonishingly lazy or unwilling to take risks or comfortable and massively underinvest in the education of their own employees, underinvest in research, and they underinvest in the adoption of technology. Government cannot do that for business, but at least in the lay press, that seems to be, apart from business all complaining they
Is this
pay
the
too
fun
much
fact
taxes.
or the question?
Oh, this is the fact. I'll do the fun fact is I have an undergrad in medieval and early Renaissance history, and I know how to hand set movable type. So I'm interested in communications technology reaching way, way back. But the general lay writing on this says that it's actually Canadian business, and whether or not that is sort of the legacy of branch plants or what, but that are underinvesting in productivity enabling technology, in research, and in training their own people.
So you are making the point with different words. I'm not sure I would use lazy, but with
It could be any one of those descriptions. I don't know what the cause
but
is.
you are actually making the point that I believe, which is we're a world leader in creating AI talent. We've got a long way to go before we're a world leader in consuming AI for our citizens and consumers. And in addition, I think the role that government has to play in this, and this is sort of like a rallying cry, if I could say this, Joseph, maybe I should say this to you, is I think that the government really does have to invest in providing like companies with operational certainty. Like for example, regulation I think on privacy to some extent would help, because I think we need signposts to say like how do we actively do business? Because if you are a Canadian business, you don't know how AI is going to be looked at for you. It is quite hard to consume, feels overwhelming. Your data's unclean if you come from any sort of historic industry. If you're from a bank and you're dealing with mainframe, and you're dealing with stuff that sits in mainframes, it's a challenge. It's a data engineering challenge. It's an architecture challenge. And the research is actually quite an important, obviously, an amazing part of it. But the algorithms probably aren't going to be actually crafted here and born here in Canada. It will be the application of that science and how quickly we can really commercialize it. So I honestly could not agree with you more, and apologies if you took the opposite point from me before.
And from my perspective, so I can't speak to all Canadian private businesses, but for businesses that are innovating, that are ready to go, that are ready to accelerate, I would expect the infrastructure to be there for us to hire graduates from schools out here instead of going halfway across the world to pull in data engineers, which is happening right now, right? I can't say that every single organization is as entrepreneurial as it should be, but for those who are ready to go, let's have the fuel that's ready to help them move forward, right? And that's where there is a bit of a lack right now. I've seen it personally over the last couple of years. We've definitely accelerated on the data science side, but there's still so much more to do. And I have to go out to China and to India to hire good data engineers.
Looks like Joe's looking like he's going to jump out of his seat and start dancing as well. Go ahead, Joe.
Just
Namor,
wanted
you're
to add
next.
to what Andrew just suggested, because over a period of, I think one of the challenges we as a society deal with is, history is often ignored, and today's news becomes the news for some time. So over a sustained period of time, Canadian universities have been funded heavily. These computational thinking, which we have as talent, mathematical departments, that's been funded sustainably over many, many years, which is one of the reasons that we are a superpower in AI. The funding, I think 18 countries have AI strategies, and the Pan-Canadian AI strategy has put in $125 million into it, and those institutions which you just mentioned, Shelby, are part of it. So I work in the area where we attract investments into this province. So I see a caravan of companies landing up in Toronto, in Waterloo, in Ottawa, in Ontario to get that talent. I see companies coming out of Silicon Valley to pitch their tent here, and they're going after the talent. And that talent has emerged because of the sustained role played by the triple helix model I said industry. We have more than 100 campus accelerators across this province, just across. I'm not talking Canada, if you look at it. So there is a strong bond or connection between the theory and the applied industrial application. So often, in conversations, the rich depth or in-depth part of the equation is neglected for what happened yesterday or what happened today. Somebody can emerge as a winner only if there is sustained depth work in the vineyards. You can't just fly into a place and create an utopia. So we have a track record for it.
All right, Namir.
Finish on this. So the issue is not your interesting startup and sort of small players. The economy is dominated by a series of oligopolies. And you will see the very interesting debate around the restructuring of Canada's payments infrastructure. And you look at Europe, you look at Great Britain, you look at Australia, and you see enormous innovation. You look at the Canadian banks, who historically actually had terrific payments infrastructure, but boy, the debate about open banking is causing all the big five are saying, oh, risk, be very careful. And they're ironically enough, you argued that, what in fact industries need is certainty and stability. I would be quite certain that if Steve Baines came forward and said, look, we're going to have a European-style privacy rules, the banks and the telcos and most of the big industry in Canada would say, oh my God, we're going to lose to the United States because the US has no privacy rules, and there would be a massive screeching festival. So part of the issue is how do we get the incumbent industries to be more competitive and more creative, I think.
I'm going to have Namir. Namir, you...
It's going, I was going to talk about the labor market, but then I'll jump on the, issue of the regulatory aspect. I think you're absolutely right. I think we need certainty in the regulatory environment, because what's happening with GDPR in Europe, but also open banking, where it's actually instructing the banks to open up their data to allow third-party players to come in and play in this space. This is powerful, because in the absence of that, you're not going to make any change and allow innovation to take place. But also the whole construct of GDPR and compared to PIPEDA, we'd have to reflect on it, the data portability, the proactive disclosure by companies. There's a lot there that we have to think as an economy. But in the absence of having a clear data strategy, as well as, while we talk about AI, data strategy is going to be important, because in the absence of that, companies will, especially multinationals, will hesitate to say, well, how do I work within the uncertain environment? So whether it's on telecom and foreign ownership, whether it's on banking and something, we need certainty in that aspect. So I'll stop there. It's a whole debate that we can.
1 second, we have a question. So there's another question? I have one over here by a gentleman, I think, of Marco. Is that right?
No, I was doing a Marco Polo thing, so you could find me.
Holy smokes, what a crowd. Okay. What's your fun fact?
Actually, yeah, so my name is Jeremy. I'm one of the co-leads for a conference called the Canadian Dream Summit. So our mission is to rally the resources to raise up the next great generation of Canadian scale-ups. So this is very relevant. So Shelby, actually, I've read 2 of the 3 Deloitte white papers.
Oh, gosh.
On your right.
There is a white light.
There you go.
I can't see you.
Oh, fine, sorry. I was like, where?
Yeah.
Disorienting.
So in one of the white papers, possibly the third one, I think 40% of people of AI companies identified integrating AI. Let me read it here on my notes. Integrating AI into the company's roles and functions as the problem. So whereas I think Canadian companies have been historically and notoriously late on betting on Canadian companies, they wait for Americans or whomever to bet on them first. This is a case where AI companies are potentially failing to educate, whether it's banks, telecoms, et cetera, on their value propositions. So from all of your perspectives, this is an advanced audience, but if you're speaking to people who genuinely worry about Skynet, how do you bridge the gap between how AI can provide business value and how it won't, destroy your company?
And so first of all, I would tell every scale-up in the country, if you, truly, if you do not understand the domain you're trying to sell into, people always say, well, and how many startup scale-ups, and I've met with hundreds, say to me, it's really the business. Like when I work with the bank, they really provide me with the use case. There is almost no potential, in my view, to scale up without having domain expertise around the core technology, functionality, almost period. And I've seen this so many times, and I just want to say, much like we've seen some large Canadian scale-ups these days hire domain experts very publicly, and we'll leave it at that. that is the secret to success. So I would encourage, you and others to encourage startups and scale-ups to really figure that piece out. I think the answer, though, and this is trite, and I get this is why, it is incumbent upon all of us in this room to go to these conferences and to speak in every forum we can, is I really just think we should all be committed to the literacy of Canadians around artificial intelligence, trying to basically say, yeah, general AI, super intense.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I am not an expert on general AI, though. I don't think any AI expert
Nobody
would,
is, yeah.
would claim to be claim to really have any of it. People always ask me, when is singularity going to happen? I'm like, I don't know. And then they, I don't think I'm supposed to know, though. I think it would be weird if I thought I did. And so I think that really we have, anyone who's putting on these conferences and summits, Michelle and others, this is just so important to our future as a country. That is why, all of us who are committed to hiring Canadians and hiring, and working with Canadian companies and having a Canadian specific purpose, which I'm not saying is the role of everyone. As Joseph rightly pointed it out, Adobe, Samsung, there are just dozens of countries who have come here to have our talent. For me, I really want Canadian companies to also use our talent. It's just our mission in Omnia is really around the future of Canada, in addition to being about artificial intelligence. And so that's not everyone's mission, but it is certainly ours. And so, yeah, couldn't agree more. Get domain expertise around you, or you're not going to make it.
Just want to add to that what Shelby said. There is also a big focus on scaling up companies, because that's one of the strategies.
I don't mind non-Canadians, I'm happy.
Sorry. So I have some examples. There are companies which started up in campuses, like you take Shopify or OpenText or BlackBerry. In some, somebody just, it was a campus project. A bunch of guys got together in a pub, drew some diagrams on a napkin. It came up as a startup. It got heavily funded, and they are in more than 100 countries, more than 100,000 clients. And these companies are having AI shops. So I come across these companies. They are thinking about it, working on it. So I think, Megalon, for example, is one of the products they've developed AI product for, the oil and gas industry, for finding faults in pipelines, etc. So there are a lot of examples of this happening, although it may not be in the limelight. So I think that's something we need to be aware of, that we have a fertile ecosystem which is good at producing startups and scaling up. And there's always areas to improve, bring more venture capitalists, those kind of things. But we also have a VC ecosystem, which was again put together as a triple helix model.
And I think it's about showcasing as well, too, the ethical use of AI and being very transparent about what you're doing with the data. And people do have this complex that AI is all about the singularity. It's all about general AI. But AI isn't always all that sexy, right? You can use AI to clean your data and have that much higher quality data, which then goes into feedback into other AI algorithms, right? And showcasing the value proposition along that chain is really important. So I think people just have a huge misconception when it comes to what AI actually is, and it pervades our entire ecosystem, from a simple linear regression model all the way up, right? So.
Achille,
Hey, Pat.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, from a startup perspective, I think you're right. I think we do have a richer ecosystem, certainly, than we did. I started a startup. I had a startup that sold to Deloitte. That's how I ended up there. And focus was on disrupting the legal sector. And it did really well. That's a pretty good start. But as a young Canadian woman who had, hundreds of people working on different sort of staffing models within the organization, in my little startup on a loft on Queen Street, I could not have understood how I would have gone global at that stage in my life. And now I think, maybe I've gained some sophistication, and I have learned a few things from this great organization I work for, and have learned some key lessons. But I think at the time, I think for as many companies as have had the benefit, and kudos to the great Canadians, I think it's so fantastic and celebrate that. I just wish we could produce, I wish every one of me that came up would have decided to go global. And not to say it hasn't been a fantastic journey for me, but I just think we need more options and even more support for our startups and scale-ups, who I think truthfully are falling really, really short in terms of this integration point.
That's a good takeaway point. That's a really strong takeaway point.
Thank you.
Okay, panel. How are we doing? How do you feel? Is there anything, burning desire to talk about anything or add to anything? And I'm also talking to the gentleman on the phone.
Just one line, to bring us back to where we started off, right? The 5G is sort of they have this concept called infrastructure as a service. So this 5G is going to be very agile, and to deploy all these AI, VR technologies on top of that is an important pillar on the journey forward to ensure prosperity.
Okay. Anyone else? Anything? Namir.
I think, we talked about developing the talent supply and the importance of that. In fact, actually, the government is doing some of this. In fact, we, as an organization involved in the labor market, we're doing some talent development program called WILL, Work Integrated Learning, in fact, specifically on AI, advanced manufacturing, intelligent retail, and others. And happy to chat to give you some. But I think there is another dimension that we've got to reflect on. It's not only developing the talent supply from schooling and post-secondary education, but how do we transition or revector our workforce to understand AI and be able to create that competitive factor and be able to compete on a national, international level? That's where the game change is going to happen for us as an economy.
Yeah, I agree with
This is
that.
a good segue. Oh, no, go ahead, Joe.
Just
Can
one
I
point.
say something, Achille?
Yes, sir.
I'm all in favor of Canada doing well in the AI space, and I think in general you're hitting well above your weight, to use, I don't know if that's a boxing term or a term, but I don't think you can do it alone. I mean, there's just too much global competition, and countries like China who are spending, fantastic amounts of money. So maybe I could encourage partnerships with people to the country just south of you. We need help in advancing in this space as well. And I think together we could accomplish a lot more than if either of us worked on our own.
I'm available, Tom, just so you know. All right. So, Joe, go ahead.
Just quick points. One is, I think we are along the lines Tom suggested. Canada is already working in collaborative partnerships in areas like ethical AI, AI for society with France, with UK. There are CFART and others working on that as part of the Pan-Canadian strategy, one point. The second trend, in the earlier remarks you made, there's a trend of companies in Canada, banks, for example, setting up innovation labs within their own, so like a toy shop within the main big company, where these new technologies are piloted and their skill sets sort of infiltrating into the bigger organization. So that is happening. And tech adoption and skilling up are two key areas we need to be, focusing on as well.
Okay. So I'm going to pivot a little bit based on what we've talked about. And we've talked about talent. We've talked about global forces. I want to talk about emerging technological trends that are intersecting with AI and analytics. What do you believe will disrupt the industry? And when I say the industry, I mean all industries. So that's a loaded question. We can divert and take this anywhere we want to. But I will ask Tom to lead this question. So Tom, for you, if you could provide a view on what you think based on what you see, based on some work with Front Analytics, some other advisory boards you're on, or just some other engagements you've been a part of. Obviously not sharing specifics, or share whatever you can, but like real big things that are out there that is going to disrupt everything. Tom?
Well, I think that Dr. Hinton and his colleagues did the world a great favor by advancing deep learning and so on, but it's a sense of it. And my guess is in Canada, certainly in the U.S., any regulated sector is somewhat reluctant to embrace those great
Tom, you're cutting out on us.
methodologies
Tom, you're cutting out on
because
us.
you
I'm going
can't
to
explain
interrupt
them.
you. Sorry, Tom.
The technology on its own is both academic.
Sorry, guys. We really need 5G up here.
Guys, if you haven't read Tom's book, might I just recommend it? All of his books. Tom, we can't hear you right now, unfortunately.
Let's just explainability. Explainability is the technology.
But he has awesome things to say.
He really does. So I'm going to divert a little bit, Tom. I'm going to come back to you. I'm sorry. It's choppy. 5G in Canada is not where it needs to be. Give me a few minutes. So who wants to take this on and develop further? Namir, are you good? Okay.
I mean, I think we talked about the IoT and prevalence of the 50 million devices, connectivity, and the intelligence that this will create in the next number of years. But the whole premise of AI is relying on reliable and data that is able then to make decisions. And I think there is an intersection there that we have to look at which technologies like virtual distributed ledgers that will provide some of that trust and authenticity of the sources of data that we're overlooking as a country. I think we're jumping ahead with the notion of 5G and AI, but with the advent of the several million devices that will be connected and the ability of 5G, as I explained, to have a connectivity density of approximately 1 million devices per square meter compared to 2,000, it will enable this massive machine-to-machine, connected cars, connected retail, health sector, and everything. But ultimately, AI will have to rely on reliable data. And the intersection with potentially blockchain or virtual distributed ledger capability is going to be important in the next number of years.
An old friend. I'm going to see if I can get Tom back. DJ Patel, Tom, I'm sure you remember this, said that the actual structure of the internet couldn't sustain right now what 5G would do to everybody. Tom, can you hear us?
Yes.
I'm going to let you answer again, if you
Can you hear
can.
me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Shelby will preface or paraphrase anything.
Yeah. Well, I was talking about the importance of explainability, particularly for deep learning. I think that's a really important advance that's needed. And as far as the IoT is concerned, we will have 20 billion devices, but almost as many
Next time we have to have you
That
here,
was
Tom.
the good part. You guys missed the good part.
90 there are 90 different standards for IoT data now and 26 different standards organizations. So maybe Canada can agree on one and help the rest of the world out.
Once again, I'm available, Tom.
You talk about the capacity of the internet to support a lot of this. I mean, with the upward trend in electric vehicles, and the ease with which they can be created, so many fewer moving parts, the reduction in cost of batteries, you're going to see this huge rise. And then the utility grid just isn't designed to support that. So I think what you're going to see, too, is that convergence coming in, and AI is going to help us figure out when is the best time to charge these vehicles, at what point in time. And so I think the intersection from an automotive perspective with EVs is, we're going to see a huge use of AI there. And you talk about standardization, even within the realm of the automotive sector. I mean, the standardization just really isn't there. But there's a number of efforts being pushed forward to work on that, to make sure that we can, across OEMs, have some standard way of communicating when it comes to data.
Just to add to that, one of the advantages, again, Canada has in this field is our diversity of sophisticated industries. Even in Ontario, we have a very vibrant auto sector, aerospace sector with companies like Bombardier, Boeing, agriculture sector, mining sector. So it's a very diverse economy, and that is key for identifying the use cases and scaling up AI solutions. That's an advantage we have, and that is happening in those sectors. AI is creeping in to build applications. like institutions such as Vector Institute are bringing. It's a partnership between private companies. There are banks involved. There are retail companies involved, like Loblaw, different companies. So they are,
company.
and the top level researchers are involved to really start on that path to developing solutions. So in terms of the technology, AI, disruptiveness of AI, this is my personal insight that I've gathered. AI means three things. One is it's pattern recognition, it is prediction, and it is decision making. There are different levels of decision making, but if you keep those three things, it provides some clarity of what the potential of this technology is. In terms of the application, I find three areas to be dramatically important for humankind or society at large. First is the medical field, genomics and stuff like that, where typically, I know this company, Deep Genomics, Ontario company, typically to develop a drug for a disease, like let it be cancer or Parkinson's, you're talking about 12 years and I think $2 billion, or something around that. Now with algorithms and the data that can be put to work, that is being targeted to reduce to 50 million in 4 years. So that's a giant leap. This is transformative. The same thing is for autonomous vehicles, vision and safety, road safety, analytics. So autonomous vehicles and the healthcare area, there is major disruptiveness that's going to happen, or there's potential. And also what you mentioned, the IoT space, like smart cities, it's going to dramatically, positively impact the quality of life. That's where I'm seeing this. And one good thing about Canada is our AI discourse is fairly mature compared to several other jurisdictions. We are always putting both those, the technology, the policy, and issues like security and privacy on equal footing as we build forward. So I don't think every society has the same balance. So we have a big advantage that we have a good balance in the discourse.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
After this, I have another question.
Yeah, no problem. I just wanted to touch on one kind of trend that I'm seeing that could, if we're not careful, I think, result in a bit of a downward trend on the AI realm, because I've seen it happen time and time again. And as we know, data is really the lifeblood of AI, and in order for us to do some really amazing things with it, there needs to be appropriate data sharing agreements in place. But when people get confused about what they can and can't do with data, especially from a privacy perspective, it just elongates that roadmap to getting to effective use of AI. And what we're starting to see in the United States especially is fragmented privacy legislation. A CCPA is coming up in California. We've got one coming up in Nevada. It's fragmented across the board. And as an organization, if you want to figure out how you can activate on something, now all of a sudden you have to worry about 50 some odd different legislations, and that will elongate the process to adding value to data and what we're doing from an AI perspective. So I would urge us as Canada to be leaders in that front and come up and craft appropriate legislation that allows us to ethically use a lot of this data and push our AI development forward.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Totally agree with you, Mark. I think what is needed as well, because as with the advent of so much data and who owns the IP to some of that data, we need to reflect on how is it potentially viable to create a Canadian clearinghouse for that, so that you can put your data and it's used based on a licensing mechanism or used for education, but we need to reflect on that concept.
And
All right,
I
guys.
totally agree. And here's one beyond. What about the UN? If we look internationally, should we just be constraining it to ourselves? Should the UN really be?
You guys are killing me now.
Sorry, go ahead.
All right. No, it's good. I'm glad you're having fun. I'm constrained by some time, so I promise I do a couple things. So how much time do I have? This says 17 minutes. Is that right? Okay. So you each have, so Namir, Mike, Tom, Shelby, and Joe, you have 1 minute. Michelle invites us back 10 years from now. Where are we gonna be, and what's this talk gonna look like? You have 1 minute. Go ahead, Joe.
So I think there will be a synthesis between, or big synthesis between computer science and neuroscience, and we would have cracked the from specific intelligence to we would have gone to general intelligence by that time. In the industry and work, you would be co-working with AI situations like that. That's one thing. Major material discovery, material science discoveries, graphene, those kind of things. major material would have been discovered which would dramatically change industries. The use of it, cars could perhaps would be made with something else. I can't predict, but I think we would be a society that is more enlightened. A quality of life would be more enabled with AI, and humankind would, our society would get more time to do the things that it deserves to do by elevating or leveraging the higher latitudes of the mind for discovering and inventing and deploying more powerful things.
Excellent. Shelby.
Oh goodness, I feel like I need more time to think about this. I will sign up for Joseph's vision. I think that sounds pretty good. But I don't know that I'm that optimistic, which is interesting because I'm pretty optimistic. What I would say is that I think that we will still be in the age of what I'll call the age of width. We are trying to figure out our role and sort of a machine role within our society, and we're still sort of trying to figure out how to make it less friction in our society. Man sort of working alongside machine. We will still have decisions being made through judgment in humans, but we will have, the underlying information base will be synthesized in a much more harmonious way. I hope Canadian companies will be thriving and rich as a result of their massive adoption of AI, and I hope that we will continue to invest in our educational components as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Mike.
Ditto. No, I mean,
Ditto.
I
dancing,
agree
Mike.
with that, and also agree that I think general AI is way out there. I don't think we're anywhere close. Personal opinion, and I see I think more autonomy is going to happen within kind of microcosms within cities. I don't think widespread adoption of autonomous vehicles is going to happen within a city, but I think microcosms in cities will be more autonomous, and we will see, I think, things like sidewalk labs and everything coming a little bit more to fruition, hopefully with that ethical lens on as well too. I think it's going to happen in chunks.
Thank you. Neymar.
I'm potentially a lot more optimistic on that. I mean, I like what I see in terms of the development of AI and all the applications, whether it's from the simplest Nest to the applications of Amazon, to others that are happening in the medical field that I'm seeing and talking to a lot of the companies, to the autonomous vehicles, which we've done a lot of work in that space. And I think stage 5, if you would ask me, stage 5 means that the car becomes totally autonomous without the use even of a pilot, of a driver inside. If you asked me a year ago, I would have said it would be 2028, 2030. In fact, Audi already have the Audi A8 that is stage 4, which basically totally autonomous, but with the use of a driver. I think autonomous vehicles will be upon us by 2027, potentially even earlier in that game, because everybody's seeing. But all that will help our society, will help our advancement, will ease some of the things, the major things from the medical field that we've never been able to resolve in the next number of years. And I will close that if we keep our enthusiasm and keep our values as Canadians in terms of how do we project to the world, AI could be a huge segue for us to position ourselves in the next number of years. Stop there.
Perfect. Thank you. So Neymar, Mike, Shelby, Joseph, and Tom. Tom's actually sent me a text. The service got worse, so he had to sign off. We'll work on that. Michelle, maybe we can get him here live next year or in 10 years when we all have, we reunite this panel. A lot of deep conversation, a lot of good discussion. I want to leave some formal time for questions period from the audience. So we've had a couple great questions. We'll circle back to see, did we actually answer your questions and how'd you find things? Be nice. And we don't need to go into fun facts, but I can't see, but I don't know. Oh, there we go. So I think there's a question here. And again, thank you once again. We do have about 10 minutes for questions. So, sir.
One quick question. So what are Canadian companies and the government doing to try to retain talent here? Because a lot of people, once they graduate, they will go to the States for work because of higher pay and potentially more interesting work.
You guys heard that, right?
Yeah, I can take that. I can start off. I think the first is the linkage of the startups ecosystem, like the campus accelerators, and the support systems available to build a startup and scale. That's one. The second is, in the AI field, the research institutions such as Mila, Vector Institutes, AMI, where leading researchers are attracting the talent from different disciplines within Canada to get into solving these bigger problems. And there's a closely knit feel of community, so that I've met folks who come from the Silicon Valley to do things here in AI, and also there's a very strong bond in terms of the problem solution. You're working on something bigger than the normal. So that itself, this is the fruition of consistent efforts from the governments to fund, to envision, to strategize and deploy these kind of institutions which attract top talent to work and solve problems.
People are coming to the Toronto area because we are known for this. I mean, there's a good, vibrant ecosystem here, for sure. There's a lot more we can do, but we have such a strong ecosystem here. And I think we need to work hard at keeping the work innovative and interesting for bright young talent, and making sure that it's not just about the bottom line. The next generation coming in is concerned about the world, concerned about smart cities, making sure that the work that they have is really, truly meaningful. So that's some of the things that we certainly focus in on, is like, we have access to, like, there's 1.8 million commercial vehicles that we work with on a daily basis. It's telling us something about the world around us beyond just helping our end customers. Can we help you look at hyper-local air quality monitoring? There's just so much. So I think it's constantly being innovative about the way you approach data and the way you think about it is going to help us retain the talent. We have to be better than anybody else.
We should ask Michelle for an extension. I think we need 20 more minutes. Anyone else? Any other questions? I cannot. For the life of me, I'm looking for.
There's one right here.
Where?
Oh, here as well.
You will be next. Sir, you'll be next.
Oh, and there's a young woman in the middle here as well.
Okay. So we'll start. There's right here.
All right. Hey, Mike.
Hi, mate.
So I guess my question is, in terms of education, I think, especially over the next 10 years, as AI becomes more important and automation changes the way that our careers look, is our existing, particularly our secondary education, sufficient, and how would you transform that so in 30, 40 years we're actually ready for the world that's coming?
That's a good question. Who's going to take that?
So I can start off by saying that we have one of the best education system, at least in Ontario, Canada. In the OECD, there's something called the PISA score, PISA, that's for math and science. We are top ranked. So that shows that our, the pre-university system has the backbone and the foundation to produce the right thinking mind capable of computational thinking. And also, in terms of our population, we are top ranked in the OECD. Over 70% of our population has post-secondary qualifications, and particularly in the information communication technologies, it's more than 80%. So highly skilled workforce that can only get even better because of the stuff we have just discussed. So I think some of the skills that may be relevant are computational thinking, ability, math and statistics, integration. How do you integrate, given the technologies, sandboxes we just discussed, AI, VR, autonomous, all these technologies, the ability to abstract and integrate things. It's not about coding, but it's at a higher level abstraction and problem solving. And I think one of the advantages, again, we have a good mix of institutions which are both analytical focused and creative focused. I think that balance is helpful. And the last point I want to make is the ability to frame problems. What's a problem worth putting my time, my PhD, my money into, and looking at it not from a narrow mindset, but in terms of looking at it from how many people can this touch? Because if you just look at it from the money perspective, it's narrow-minded, I would say. But if you look at framing a problem of how many humans can it touch, you're looking at a global solution.
I think Namar's next, and then Shelby.
So part of the challenge in this environment is that the environment is changing in such a dramatic, fast way that your first degree is no longer it's not binary. You come out with a degree that you have the continuity in that environment. And we have to reflect as an economy, is that specifically from an education point of view, what is the role of finishing schools? Because we are definitely, I'm an engineer, and I know that you'd have to go back to retrain on the best and the greatest that it's happening in that environment to remain employable for the next number of years. And in fact, that's a discussion, and that's part of the initiative that we're doing with Calgary at the moment. They have one of the highest number of engineers per capita that we're trying to transition into in-demand growth sectors of the Canadian economy with short duration training on this. That's where the magic is going to happen in the next number of years. And it's not going to be just technology skills, it's going to be organizational people skills, but industry domain knowledge, because a coder that's coming out to work on AI for the e-commerce may not have the same knowledge of understanding the demographics on the markets and so forth, that if they go and work with the health sector, they need to understand the effect of immunization on the larger population and others. So domain knowledge, language is going to be important in the next number of years.
Okay, we're wrapping up. Temperature of the audience. How do we do? How do we do? You guys did awesome. I don't know if there's some last burning points, but I want to make sure I respect the time for everybody. I'm not going to get to all the questions. We are not going to get to them, but hopefully we're going to stick around a little bit for a drink, a beverage, or just hang out. And you are open to people coming up and asking you for your expert advice. I thank you for the opportunity to moderate this panel. There's a wealth of knowledge here, and I definitely think we need more time. I definitely appreciate the time. For the audience, thank you for your involvement. I really liked the engagement. It was great. I wish we had more questions. If there's something that we have not done, just come up and ask. I don't know in terms of, where's Heiko? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So listen, thank you very much. I think we're done. We're a wrap. Any burning questions or any last minute 30-second comments from my amazing panel?
You did a great job.
Fantastic.
Let's dance.